Well, welcome back to the Better Divorce podcast. It's your favorite host, or hopefully your soon to be favorite host, Paulette Rigo. And yes, I'm the CEO and founder of Better Divorce Academy, and author of #1 best-selling book, workbook, audiobook, and online course. It's right there if you're watching the video. Better Divorce Blueprint, and of course, the host of the Better Divorce podcast. Today, I have a very special guest slash friend slash peer slash, I don't know, just a sacred kind of, we're like on the same vibe on the work that we do. And her name is Kim Corven. She's from Canada, and I have a rather international audience. So all of my Canadian friends, I love you. I also trained with a alternative dispute resolution expert that wrote the book Clean Break up in the Toronto area. So I have a lot of clients and people in Canada, and I love to spread the word internationally. I, of course, live in Atlanta, but I'm originally from Boston. And those of you may know, I lived in Belize for 3 years. So I also have a Central American audience. Crazy. And many people that live in cold climates, like Kim and I did in Boston, like to go to the South or become expats. So with no further ado, I'm so glad you're here, Kim. So let's start right off with your background and why you got into this crazy field of divorce in the first place.
So the great, well, I'm first, Paulette, I'm so glad to be back and connecting with you again. And so I was, of course, the lawyer, graduated #4 in my class. I actually never studied family law in law school. I wanted to do corporate work. I ended up at a firm, though, that did a lot of family law. So for about 6 years, all kinds of issues, all levels of court. And what was interesting is when my marriage was ending, is when I started questioning, oh yeah, that client who fought over spices. Like, it's like I didn't want to do that to my kids.
Right.
Um, and so I had to figure out, and I had a husband who, for religious reasons, did not believe in divorce. And I wasn't going to put that trauma, and I'd seen what people had paid, right? Like that woman with the spices paid me $200 a month for years. And so I had to do things differently.
Yeah.
And it all started, of course, with how I told him. It wasn't about, you're distant, our son's afraid of you. There was none of that. It was, you and I aren't bringing out the best in each other. And when I think about our good memories, most of them are from when we were dating. Like we stopped being a couple a long time ago, and our kids deserve better. So that was my personal experience, and I never thought anything about how I did it. Even though people would say, Kim, how did you do it? Like they knew both of us, and they're like, this should have been a fight. Why wasn't it a fight? And the fact that like really what did it, Paulette, was I had this goal that I wanted my kids to have the best relationship possible with their dad. And that's what transformed everything. And then it was years later, a cousin going through a really ugly divorce battle, traditional divorce battle in court, hardly seeing his kids. And he walked off the face of the earth, and his body was found over 3 months later. Yeah. And that hit me hard. And that's when I started thinking, I need to figure out what I did and help other people. So I eventually walked away from the practice of law. It took me 2 times to retire from my profession. That's a funny story. But I walked away so I could help families better, right? And in the meantime, I mean, I was a mediator before I divorced as well. So, but it's a long story.
Yeah. We all have a long story. And this isn't a 6-hour podcast, so we're going to try to
No.
keep it succinct. And I commend you for that. It's very tempting as a litigator, and or whether you're in civil, family, criminal, bankruptcy, real estate,
Hmm.
whatever type of law that you're practicing, to kind of go for the gusto and want the big firm and the notoriety and the big name on the building, and the brick and mortar and the whole image of the law firm, and having that prestige and all of the Rolex and the Mercedes, and I'm being very US here.
Yeah.
The image of the successful litigator, right? And there are certain types of situations where you do need that type of person in the courtroom to cross-examine and really speak for you when it really does get
Hmm.
life or death situation. But for the most part, I always like to say that criminal law is basically bad people on their best behavior, and family
Hmm.
law is basically, and I say that tongue in cheek, overall good people on their worst behavior. And it gets so contentious so quickly and so expensive and takes so much time. And as you said, fighting over the spices. I had a couple that were fighting over the Jura, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, coffee makers. And they're like $8,000 in the US. And I think they're up to 10. They're ridiculously expensive, and I think they had three of them, if I recall. So I, assumed one would keep one would keep the other, and maybe they'd gift the third or sell it, or what the hell, the coffee obsessed person could keep the third. But no, it actually got arbitrated. It was crazy. So, Kim and I have our war stories, and we won't harp on that. That's not the focus of this conversation. And we were reminiscing a little bit earlier. I think it was around the pandemic time, where we all kind of got stuck in our little offices and weren't allowed to
Hmm.
shake hands and hug people. If we remember that insanity.
Yeah.
And she apparently found me on a Facebook group where I commented about somebody's inquiry about something having to do with divorce, and we ended up working together. I think it was about 6 months, 3 months, I forget exactly,
Yeah.
a good amount of time. And I said to her, "Why do you want to work with me?" And you can tell everyone what your answer was, but I was dumbfounded, and it was such an honor for me as a I've also done book writing, coaching, and business coaching, particularly in this realm, to watch your transformation, witness myself with my eyes and
Hmm.
my heart, to see you from this kind of stressed out kind of what am I doing with my career? I know I've got so much to give and teach and share and help and serve, but I don't know how to kind of take off the coat or the cloak of the litigator and the attorney
Hmm.
and transition into that vibrant, successful, you know, online uh, entrepreneur. I guess that
Yeah.
and so that was our introduction with one another. And I've of course learned so much about Kim as a woman, as a professional, as a wife, a mother, a sister too. But all of those things where you realize, like, we are full dimensional people, and we come with our own stories and why we're so passionate about doing the work we do. And I am so happy that you've created this very successful mediation business and platform. So without further ado, I will now stop talking and ask you to tell everyone about this journey of yours from stressed out litigator to thriving entrepreneur.
Well, thank you. And of course, what I said, I mean, one of the first, I said, I want to be you
You're gonna
because,
make me cry, everybody.
it's exactly right. Like there I was, lawyer, used to doing things as lawyer, right? And I still have people go, Kim, you're getting into the weeds here, too many details. That's how lawyers communicate. Oh yeah, okay, okay. And there is a real mindset shift because as a lawyer, you're taught to be a zealous advocate for your client, and you're taught to scan for worst possible outcomes, no matter how minute the risk. And you're also, though, what was impacting my mediation business was this notion that a lawyer has to charge less, provides less value. I mean, a mediator provides less value than a lawyer, so therefore charge less. Like I had one senior mediator tell me, I think in 2018, we'll charge $100 an hour. Well, what I discovered is mediation actually takes way more energy. And it is not like a lawyer. You work with a lawyer, and even if they negotiate settlement on your behalf, the settlement agreement is just going to be cookie cutter that they give to the assistant and say, okay, do this. And it's work that they can do. It's not, they're not as engaged at a deep level, because mediation, we manage process, as you know. And we're also managing how to get people, the emotional aspect, how to get people on the same page. What's going to connect them here to remembering, oh, we weren't always enemies, right? And we each bring different gifts to our kids. So it has, so that was a tremendous boon to my practice, working with you. And my practice continues to evolve because, of course, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a lot more trauma.
Yes.
Right? And a lot more, like, I hear from so many women about, well, yeah, well, I told my husband I want a divorce, and no, and he doesn't accept it. And recently I was interviewed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation about the radicalization of men in divorce. That was an example I gave, right? About, like, men, like, your wife is not your property. And if she wants a divorce, like, you don't have a veto. So the mediation side, what I realized, like, just because I can have, and the narcissistic man, ironically, working with me, they'd be more generous if they hadn't been to attorneys yet. But it's really heavy, heavy work. And what I was hearing from people in calls was always, we don't know how to divorce. How do we do this? We don't want to work with lawyers, like our parents divorced, and I'm still traumatized. So I've created a My Lawyer Free Divorce course, which is 5 modules, which starts with getting people on the same page around their kids, and then translating divorce concepts into English. And it really doesn't matter where people live, right? Because
Sure.
divorce didn't start out as a legal issue. It started out as marriages were ending, and government had to figure out what to do with this, how to deal with it. So then the life event was translated into legal ease
Mm-hmm.
that became very difficult for people to understand. So I just do the translation back so people can be empowered. Here's the information you need to gather, right? And it really doesn't matter where you live. You're going to wonder, where are the kids going to live? How are we going to make decisions about them? How do we share our property? Those are all the questions. So it's universal. Then I have a module on separation agreements. Here's what you need in a separation agreement. Here are some templates. Then there's court forms, and the court forms are from where I live, but then I did research. Okay, what do you need to Google? Who are the best sites, to get help? And then there's a module on resources. So, which include, here are the different kind of professionals, right? So you can find somebody close to where you live. So you're in Atlanta, divorce mediators or divorce coaches, you're going to find Paulette. And it just went live on Sunday, and I'm wildly excited about it.
Well, I'm so proud of you because I remember the day where I turned my computer around and, we used my 6 foot by white foot,
Mm-hmm.
4 foot whiteboard. And,
Right.
I broke down what you were doing. Tell me a little bit about your business. Like, who is your ideal client and who do you work with? Who do you want to serve? And what are you doing? And then, transforming it, 10 years from now, where do you see your business? What is it you want it to look like? And really creating that vision. And now I'm going to say 4 or 5 years later, the fact that you've done it, you're like the poster child client. I'm so
Well,
excited.
well, I didn't when we worked together, I was aspiring to charging people more to work with me one on one.
Right.
And I evolved away from that. Like, yes, I will still do mediation with the right people, but why I'm so excited about the course is because it's a cost-effective way for people to get started and be empowered and to realize, oh, I can do this. And part of the course, I do one group coaching call. They get one group coaching call with part of it. And because I used to be a lawyer, I can't take calls live, right? If I take live calls, that's legal, giving legal advice, bad, 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 bad.
On the wrist for that one. Yeah.
So it's like, give me your questions in advance,
Mhm.
and then it can be legal information.
Sure. More procedural than specificity.
Well, and if three people have similar questions,
Right.
it's like, yeah,
Gunshots
yeah,
forward or whatever. You can take less time and not answer question A, question B, and question
yeah.
C. When it's basically a similar question, you can, delineate what it exactly they're seeking. What is the information that the confusion that they're experiencing? I think that's great.
And and what was interesting was I ran it as a boot camp, very it was very rough and ready last fall. And I had one couple say yes. And so, okay. So I ran it with them. And my initial plan was just to have those materials as the course. But the people who I now have working in the back end were like, no, 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 no. Right. And so it's really stretched me to put it together.
Yeah.
But then I researched how many divorces are there in the United States every year, how many divorces in Canada. And in the United States, right, it's over 600,000, like it's about 640,000 divorces are granted a year.
Yeah.
And in Canada, it's 43,000.
Hmm.
And I'm like, and then I also came across stats that 62% of all court files, one person at some point in time doesn't have a lawyer. So it's like this is a market that really, like, I was like, my goodness, this is a huge market,
It's a big problem, Kim.
right? Like it is a big problem because, like I look at how I divorced, and since you don't know this about me because we haven't talked in a few years, but I did a TEDx talk last year, and it's called Can Divorce Foster Resilience in Children? And my son gave me permission to share his story, right? And he was the misbehaving child who, I mean, he was suspended in grade one, right? And,
Um,
and he ended up going to university. He had a chair at the local symphony orchestra. Like, it wasn't, oh, if we need an extra. No, no, he was second trombone. And his prof wanted him to apply to go to grad school to become a prof. And with that chair at the symphony, he was fast tracked for it, right? But he said, Mom, music isn't fun anymore. So he's off in the Naval Reserves for Canada. And last summer, he was on a deployment with the U.S. Coast Guard, and they actually recovered the most cocaine, 41 million US of cocaine. And the Coast Guard had a press release on it, so I can talk about it.
yeah.
But he was part of that deployment. And so it's been this, and what happened was the conflict. He was living, and I always used to say, oh, there was no conflict in our house, there was just tension.
Right.
And then when I researched my TEDx talk, I'm like, oh, tension is a form of conflict. I didn't know, right? Because my background isn't psychology. So it so the real excitement for me is helping, right, people. And I loved our conversation before we started recording, right? Because so many people are thinking about divorce. They tell family and friends, and it's, you need a good litigator to to represent you, to protect your rights. And like, without thinking about the cost emotionally and financially.
Yeah. Yeah, and the time that it takes too. I mean, my mediations are extremely effective, cost effective, private, patient. Both parents or a couple
Hmm.
spouses feel heard and seen and validated throughout the process. And I don't see that same experience when people will review their litigation experiences. So we could go on about that for days. There's also a bit of confusion about when somebody is litigating and then they mediate as a portion or a part of the
Yeah.
litigation process versus hopefully, or more optimally, they're mediating prior to any decision to litigate, right? So it could be a different experience. Many people say, oh, we litigated, it failed. Well, chances are in that case, they were already
Or we mediated and it failed. Yeah.
correct, right. So there's already a plaintiff and a defendant in discovery and interrogatories, and they're marching down that domino effect of, litigation, litigation, litigation. And yes, there is that conversation in many of the states here, and of course, US and Canada, it's required, right? So
It is here too. Yeah.
required part of litigation. But that's not the optimal experience or version we're discussing. So, not to say that that isn't a helpful conversation to have, but it isn't as productive as an experience with time and cost and energy and that trauma that we've been experienced with the conflict.
Well, and what happens? So divorce was actually plunked into civil law
Yeah.
in 1857. And civil law was
Is that in
set up.
Canada and US or just Canada?
Well, that was actually in Britain.
Britain.
So,
Okay, gotcha.
right, but it used to be an act of parliament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it ended up in the courts in the mid 19th century. A court system designed for contract disputes where it's very logical and there's not a lot of emotions.
Business.
And I mean, like, I did mediation with a couple, and she served him with a divorce petition during mediation. And she got his notice that he was going to defend, and she phones me up. We're done in mediation. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, he doesn't want to settle. What it came down to was the wording in the petition said he was contesting. And I'm like, that is just the language. It's 19th century language. It doesn't mean he doesn't want to settle. And what happens, because there are these strong emotions, like it's Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict, right? Where she talks about there's four factors have to be present for a dispute to go high conflict. One is the presence of a conflictpreneur, which is somebody who's making money off the conflict. And you're smiling, right? Because that's an attorney.
Sure.
There's a community of support is another one, and that's the family and friends. Protect your rights without worrying about what it's going to cost. And then there's one party feels humiliated. And when you get served with a divorce petition, you feel humiliated. And so the likelihood of success decreases. And it always makes me sad when I get calls from people, yeah, I'm working with a lawyer and we have to mediate, and I know it's not going to work. And if you think it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And the other thing, Paulette, I think you and I are kind of rare birds, because I remember working with one couple and they had, it was about issues around parenting post-divorce, and they'd worked with another mediator to get a settlement. And they told me at the end of the first mediation session, wow, this is so different. she said, I still have PTSD from that mediation session. And he was much more graphic. He said it was a cluster, what, their first
I do. I
mediation.
do.
So it's if and I used to say it late in my legal career. When I was practicing family law and doing more mediation and settlement work, I would say to my clients, do you want to pay me or do you want to have money for your kids? Now
It,
the partners,
you know, yeah. I mean,
the,
even those that don't have children or for their retirement or
yeah,
anything. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
and I found a website when I was putting module 5 of the course together, a law firm that actually publishes what they charge because they don't charge hourly, it's flat fee.
Right.
So to do a divorce petition, they charge $7,500. To do the answer and counter petition, 6,500. One day of trial, 15,000.
Damn.
And that's per person, right?
Yep. It's crazy. Yeah.
So it's and you're right about the time. Like it takes years. And, clients, if they have $1 million of assets and you jump to lawyers, you're each going to be spending 200,000 minimum.
Yes, you are. And even if it were free, and it's not, but let's just hypothetically think about if it were. Are you
Hmm.
willing to set aside 2 years or more of your life and not be able to go to your kids' weddings together? Um, and many other fallouts from that kind of angst, anger, and resentment. You don't have to answer that question, Kim. I know your answer, but if to those of you listening, I'm not joking. I mean, my divorce was 8.5 years. No joke. 12-day trial. There was a 4-year Supreme Appellate Court process in the state I lived in after the judge came back with his decision. So for about a decade, it felt like 20, my life was monopolized by the judicial legal system. And
And
all of those elements of conflict existed.
and I suspect if we saw pictures of you from that time, you'd likely look older than you do now. You'd look more haggard, more drained, just because the emotional toll is so great. It is all consuming. And there's so many people who it's like they wear this badge of victimhood
Yeah.
from their wedding. Like my husband was a narcissist. Well, calling him a narcissist kind of keeps you stuck. Like, yeah, he was a narcissist, but let's negotiate this
Yeah.
so you can live your best life.
Amen. I know I'm sorry, I'm being a preacher today. Yeah, it's so important. I did everything wrong. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about doing the work I do as a mediator and a divorce coach.
I don't think you did everything wrong.
Well, thank
What you did was you followed the traditional playbook,
yes,
and so many people still believe that the traditional playbook is the only one available to them. And the great myth, of course, is that divorce is an outlier event. Oh, I'm the only one. I feel like a failure. Well, those numbers, like 640,000, or it was more than that. I think it was actually 670 because I came up with it was like 717,000
this is
divorces
a lot of
in North America in one year. It's not an outlier event.
people.
And there are so many different paths, which is, and I just think for the people who don't want to spend a fortune, who want to stay friends, want to be able to be at the high school graduation together for their kids, um, you know, like the course is such a great way to start to empower people because then, like if people have a basic knowledge of divorce, it helps Paulette in your mediation practice,
It helps
right?
everyone, and that's why I wrote Better Divorce Blueprint too.
Yeah.
It's as I spent that decade amount of time, I learned so much, Kim. I
Hmm.
witnessed hundreds of couples divorce. I would get there at 7:30 in the morning. They would call out the
Hmm.
the schedule of the cases that would be heard that day. whether it was a trial or pre-trial conference or just a, whatever during the duration. There's many meetings, motions, enforcement, all that. So I'd watch them go up to the front, raise their hand, and introduce themselves with or without attorneys. And I listened and I took notes, not specifics about names or any of that stuff, but just like what went well and what didn't go well. And I had notebook after notebook after notebook. Not only my case, of course, but just,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that went really well. And oh, that, don't do that. And, what to wear, what not to wear, what to say, what not to say. And what were those really good um, approaches or strategies and leverage, and what attorneys really had the right demeanor with their presentation, and the right witnesses, because people also don't realize it, that divorce is a public experience. Litigation is, you can, if you're bored and you have nothing to do, you could go down to the courthouse in your town and go watch the majority of any you know uh, procedure. I mean, some custodies are obviously, adoptions are,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, it's just, it's public, and you learn a lot. Well, I learned, by then I had already jumped in the pool, and what you don't realize is once you jump in the pool, it's very hard to get out. Unless both parties are like, let's get out together. So,
Well, right, it's sunk cost bias,
yeah, sure.
that we talk about with economics, but it applies to divorce. And people think, oh, I've got this lawyer, I don't trust this lawyer. I'm, $50,000 in, and we don't have the documents from the other side yet, but I need to continue.
Yeah, yeah.
No, right? You're just going to throw away more money. And it's recognizing that that's your brain tricking you. And do you find that it's really beneficial for people to have a goal, what they want their lives to be like, to keep them on track?
Well, certainly that's one of the first things I reverse engineer in
Yeah.
divorce work. Again, because I do both and not at the same time. Again, if I'm in the middle of a mediation agreement or contract with a couple,
Yeah.
I'm wearing my ADR mediation hat. And then if I'm working with one party, not the same couple, then I'm working as a certified divorce coach, some in high conflict, some in very amicable situations. That's not to say when I'm mediating, I don't use my coaching skills, and I'm coaching,
Yeah.
I use my mediation knowledge, right? And skills too. But it's a very different trajectory and energy, where
Because
you're working
because
with
I
people.
I do it with both,
Yeah, I do too.
right?
Yeah.
And I like in mediation to get people to have a goal related to the kids, or something that, right, that matters to both of them, that
Right.
interest base.
Always find
So
that
then
mission.
to evaluate,
Yeah.
yeah, to evaluate the options in
Yeah.
the light of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are those people, and I had one on Saturday. You're not going to believe this, or maybe you will, but the husband approached me, I'm going to say 3 months ago. I did some research. I've read your reviews. I hear great things about you. Tell me a little bit about what you do and how you, approach this. So I did. And he said, would you be willing to, send me that information? I sent him an email. I think he shared it with his wife. Heard from him, I don't know, a month or two later. Um, and I ended up scheduling a basic consultation just so that I could meet both parties.
Hmm.
They could answer all their questions.
Right.
Well, who did they bring with them to the consultation? The 17-year-old daughter.
Oh God.
No, this wasn't a mediation. So, there was no,
Yeah, but still.
but it caught me off guard. It had never happened before. I guess I need to put that in my agreement that no minor children or major children are to be brought. So I said, this is highly unusual. Let me speak to the child, and she'll be 18 in November. So she's very mature and articulate and bright. And I said, are you comfortable with the daughter being here, parent A and parent B? And they both said yes. And so, and I just basically, move forward with the consultation. But I did say, if you choose to mediate, the child should not be coming. Um, but it was more just the procedure and all. But it was
Well,
an opportunity for the child to share her concerns in a very raw, safe container.
Hmm.
It almost felt more, and I wasn't trying to be a mental health practitioner, but in many ways, I think I was being that safe container for her
Right.
to share her concerns with parent A and parent B. It ended up being very positive, but I'm going to have to do a little more thinking about that one. But I would not suggest anyone ever do that who's listening. But again, I'm not the parent. It was up to
Yeah.
the parents and the child to make that decision. But it was productive, and God only knows where that will go. But there was one of the parents who absolutely refused to oblige by the goal of the outcome. Their goals were extremely different. They had very different outcomes that they desired. As did the child, even though she's going to be a senior in high school and, will be 18 just around the corner in a few months, is probably more mature in some ways than both of the parents, tongue in cheek, I do say. But it was eye opening to say the least that, once those two parents do, many people don't have the integrity to be honest with that. If parent A wants something very, very different than parent B, and they're stubborn about it, I would not want to be the mediator. They might budge a little bit, I would say, but you do your very, very, very best to make them
Mhm.
realize that.
Yeah, but ultimately it's up to them. And I mean, I've worked with many couples who their kids, like one time was even as young as 5,
Yeah.
saying, "Please be kinder to each other."
Yes. 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 Yeah.
And so the perspective of the child being, "Oh yeah, I guess we need to
Yeah.
we need to split up." But I wouldn't like, yeah, I mean it's
Have you ever had
like
that
I
happen?
no, but I always talk at the start of the first mediation session about, and if your kids ask, what are you going to tell your kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, this
And
again
and
was
and and,
communication,
and
but it was awkward. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I'm just reminiscing about the conversation that we had, and it was quite long for a consult. Went about 2 hours, but nothing was mediated or agreed upon.
right,
It's really just where they were coming from and their concerns, um, and what the procedure looks like about
yeah,
that. So, but I want to go into the conversation that you and I had way back when about when I first did a little bit of investigating, exploration about what was really working in your business. It was that initial conversation that we started the podcast on about how to tell your spouse you want a divorce. And
mm,
I was like, wow, tell me more. That's really fabulous, because it's one of the problems that I get with, particularly women, although sometimes men now too,
mhm,
and I work with many clients for years before they decide they actually want to divorce.
exactly.
And
They follow us for years
yes,
and years, and then,
whether that be
oh, okay,
Substack or my blog or my book and workbook and the podcast, and people go on average to my website of 8 times before they even have the courage to do anything. And they're just pulling
yeah,
in information, and kudos to them for that. I'm really proud of them. So for that, and that's kind of neat, is that I remember way back when I was starting to think about, oh, can I save the marriage? What do I do? Am I staying together for the children? I tried to be the perfect wife. I read every Joel Osteen book known to man. I always did my hair and makeup and tried to look beautiful
the
all the time.
problem was you, right?
Perfect wife. Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, I'm just going to stick it out. I'm just going to stick it out. Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I put on my lipstick and tried to be yeah, Barbie and Ken, and I did a damn good job of it for a very long time, until I nearly had a nervous breakdown and went, what the
Hmm.
hell am I doing? And probably, yeah, there were a lot of pictures of me looking like I was 110. Yeah, that's when all the confusion is. But when I was doing my research, there was no internet really. I mean, there was, but not like there is
No.
now. So what did I do but sit my ass in the bottom of a bookstore? It was called Borders.
Hmm.
I think it's gone out of business. It's now a Wendy's. Um, that's a funny story. But at Barnes and Noble, you pick your bookstore, and I would
Right.
sit there in the self-help aisle, and I read all the books on marriage. And I didn't want to buy them, because what was I going to do? Bring them home and put them on the coffee table? No. And they didn't have really audiobooks back then. So I got an iced coffee at Dunkin' Donuts that was enormously large. That's a Boston thing. And I would read and read and read and read till I had to go pick up the kids at school about marriage and relationships and making them work. And I would study. Well, we don't do that anymore. We now, go to whatever and buy books and research.
Right.
We chat GPT things now. So using AI, and be careful what you read on AI, but that's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And but one of the things is, how do I tell my spouse I want a divorce? It's agonizing. I wrote an ultimatum, like all the things I did that were horrible and wrong. Don't do anything I did. That's why I do what I do, so you know what not to do. But Kim had this wonderful methodology, and I'm telling you, it works, because I make my clients, with her permission, go through this methodology that she lived, because she created it with her own situation. So by all means, everyone, it works. So yeah, it's this lovely way of recollecting your historical timeline of your marriage and going back to those early magical days when you first met, and you did, hopefully, knock on wood, fall in love, right? And there were memories and energies and feelings that we all had, and that left a chord in you. So and it's this path you walk through, and I don't want to, obviously we could do a whole episode on what it looks like, Kim, if you want, but
Well,
it would probably take some time.
and what's on my new website too is, like, I ended up in a really difficult mediation file where he was clearly stuck, and I was being business coaching from the artist Shiloh Sophia then, and, and she talked about rituals
Mm-hmm.
and how there are rituals for everything,
Yeah,
and it was like a light bulb going off in my head. There's no ritual for divorce.
correct.
So I crafted a ritual out of yarn. And the woman who helped me just put together the new website, when I told her about it, she said, Kim, this is a product.
Yeah.
So I actually now sell
Oh, good.
for $24 this ritual for divorce. And people get a kit, which traces some of the stuff you can do with your spouse, some of the good memories, and it's actually, and it's really funny doing it, um,
Yeah.
because the kinesthetic really gets people to a deeper level to help them move forward and have the discussions. So
And the feedback I've been getting from clients, because I'm nervous when I'll give you an example of one particular client. We worked together for 3 months. And that was mostly because she came to me, I'm going to save this marriage. We're going to go to therapy.
yeah,
We're going to stay together. And I'm like, awesome. And they're, of the 21 reasons couples typically divorce, I think they probably had 5 or 6 of them. They didn't have all 21, but there were
yeah,
one, or zero. So we worked a lot of that, and her own feelings and experiences and emotions. And then we jumped into put the emotions off on the side, and we did the spreadsheet side. It was what's life going to look like? What do you want it to look like for you, your spouse, and the children? Fast forward 6 months, 1 year, 5 years,
hmm
10 years, dare I say 20 and beyond. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want this experience to
hmm
look like? You don't want any regrets. You want to look back at this experience with pride, that you held your head high, you did all your homework, you dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and you really held yourself with grace and dignity and wisdom. And she's like, yes, that's what I want. So all of that work. So we did the numbers and the life
right,
forecasting, shall we say. But then the real fear of, like, how do I tell them this is what I want? So I said, well, a couple of years ago, and I told her about you, and I said, you ready to give it a shot? And so yeah, we kind of worked through it together. So, and she said, well, she picked the day, whatever the day was, I forget the day. And then the day, and of course the day, I wanted to text her, how did it go? And I didn't, how I contained myself. And the next day she goes, I didn't do it yesterday, I did it today. And it went great. It was perfect. Like, couldn't have gone better. And it was just, and so I was like, great. So obviously we processed it and all, but, and I played with it with other people too, but I just wanted to give you a concrete example, because it really is a game changer for starting the conversation off on the right foot versus like, oh yeah, screw you, jump in a lake, see you in court, buddy. You better get out there.
Well, and and it's interesting because I remember when I was contemplating, and it was years for me, and actually when he proposed, my whole body screamed, say no.
Oh my,
But I thought, he's going to cry. I don't know how to deal with it if he's going to cry.
right,
Oh, and the drive home is going to be so awkward. Like, how bad could it be?
right.
And then even when we did marriage prep class, because we got married in the Catholic Church, well, the priest, when we had to meet with the priest, he said, you two should never marry.
Oh my.
And we thought, what does a priest know anyway about marriage? Right? Priest knows nothing. Well, the priest was right.
That's Aaron.
So it was those memories
Yeah.
that actually led me, right? I couldn't blame him because I'm like, oh, you knew, Kim. The writing was on the wall and you chose to ignore it.
Right.
Um, and and I've had like people who've used it very effectively, and sometimes people use it and then they find an attorney who's going to work with them and prep a separation agreement, and it goes very, very well,
Yeah.
right? Like it's,
It
but it,
again, it's not foolproof, but it does give you at least a starting point of knowing what to say and how to say it and why to say it versus just like, okay, so I don't love you anymore and I want a divorce. Like how awkward is that, right? And that conversation is not going to go well. So, well, I am really excited that we've reconnected over these years. I love the fact that you are streamlining your offerings to be accessible
Mhm.
to those, obviously in Canada and beyond, so that they can really have the tools they need to make wise choices. What is the best way for people to learn about you and reach out to you?
So LinkedIn is where I like to show up on social media, just Kim Corven. And my website's kimcorven.com.
And it's
Just to
Korven, everyone. So,
correct,
yeah.
yeah. And it's just to keep it streamlined. And of course that course isn't just Canada. It's available,
Anyway,
like because the legal system in the United States is based on the British legal principles,
hmm and
just like Canada,
yeah, right, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So any former British colony,
It's going to
and
have some similarities.
well, and even I think modules 1 and 2 and 5, regardless of where you live. Well, and even 3, talking about separation agreements,
Hmm.
what you must have, because I drafted contracts for 2 years, commercial contracts. And so it's like, yeah, this is what you need in an agreement. So it's useful.
Okay.
It's information that's going to save people time and money. So,
Well, as a peer and a coach and you know, um, I don't know, a friend, I've been very enlightened by your work, and I am uh, excited by your own transformation as an entrepreneur and leaving that ugh, tough world of litigation behind. So I hope this conversation has been helpful, everyone. We tend to live in our own little world, but again, I'm a connector. I'm a constant learner. I love to evolve and grow, and I always like to have a large Rolodex of incredible professionals at my fingertips, even though I don't really have a Rolodex anymore, but I do in my brain. And it's Kim is definitely one of those go-to professionals. So I hope this has been helpful. And as we're in the season of summer, we kind of come up with starting to think about school coming to a close. I'm sorry, summer coming to a close and school beginning, where now we start to think about holidays and the next year. And it can become the season of divorce where the conversation starts to fire up with, oh no, the kids are going back to school, which means Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas and 2026. I don't know if I could be married one more year. So
hmm
now is a good time to start to, stay calm, do your research, read a lot, really gather as much information, good, solid, real information, so that you can make wise choices. So thank you so much, Kim, for coming on and speaking to everyone regarding uh, your work. And I'm glad to have you in my portfolio.
Well, thank you. It's been great to reconnect.
Until next time, you guys, make it better. See you next time.